In Tripoli were told they'd be shot dead for merely going up on the hotel roof. And late tonight, new word that a BBC News team trying to get to Zawiyah was detained for 21 hours, beaten by members of the army and secret police, hooded and subjected to a mock execution. They were finally released and managed to get out of Libya. So did Alex Crawford, the Sky News reporter who spent 3 days in Zawiyah, witnessing firsthand the repeated attacks by Gaddafi forces against poorly armed civilians with no military training, Libyan civilians who simply want an end to the rule of Gaddafi. I spoke to Alex a short time ago, and we're going to play you a lot of the interview because it clearly shows what Gaddafi is doing to his own people. And remember, as you listen to Alex, Gaddafi does not want you to hear what she is saying. He's trying to cover up what is happening in Zawiyah, but thanks to Alex Crawford, he's failed. Alex, first of all, you and your crew were able to do what no other reporters in Libya were able to do, actually get into Zawiyah and stay there. How did you get in?
Well, I think the timing was absolutely critical, Anderson, because we went in on the Friday, on the day of Friday prayers. And although there had been fighting earlier on that day, there certainly wasn't the massive military ring around the town that there is now. We had to go through several checkpoints to get there, but we managed to, and we were with a very sympathetic person who drove us in. And as we arrived, there was a huge march going on of several thousand people. So we got out of the car and we just saw this wave of people coming towards us and realised that they were all anti-Gaddafi people. They were all civilians. I didn't see anyone in army fatigues or army uniforms or anything. They were just this huge body of people, and we're looking amongst them.
We're looking at the video right now. Essentially, they were marching, it looked like, for the most part, unarmed, and then just got fired upon.
Yeah, there were a few people, very few people, I'd say about half a dozen people at the head of the group who had one person on the car, for instance, had a pistol. One person who was wandering along the side had a Kalashnikov slung over his shoulder, but mostly the huge majority were just civilians walking, were unarmed, and they were just chanting anti-Gaddafi slogans and calling on him to leave. They were marching towards the military lines that had been set up. A tank was in front of us and a number of military vehicles. And as they got close, they opened fire. And they didn't just open fire once or twice, and they didn't just fire over them, they fired into them. And the casualties were just instant and immediate, and they carried on firing.
And we're seeing people run away right now from that firing. What's so important, not only remarkable about your reporting, but what's so important about it is because pretty much each step of the way, you show evidence, direct evidence, irrefutable evidence, that the Gaddafi regime is not telling the truth in many of their public statements. For instance, they repeatedly say they have not fired on unarmed protesters. You personally witnessed them doing just that.
They did it not just once, but scores of times. I mean, I can't even count how many times they did it over the entire period that we were there. And we were in Zawiyah from Friday midday until Sunday afternoon. And there was continuous, constant, repeated shelling, firing, bombing, attacking of that town. And the military got closer and closer and got basically is trying to strangle the town. And the people inside it, they aren't, I mean, to call them a rebel army is just not the case there. There may be rebels in the east, a sort of rebel army made up of defections from the Gaddafi army, but in this town they are 99% civilians. There are a few soldiers who have defected, very, very few, and they brought with them some weaponry, but they are vastly outnumbered by the civilians in the town. This is a town that's under siege, being constantly attacked, and there is a massacre going on there.
The other lie that the regime has been telling, which your reporting again highlights and points out, is this claim by Gaddafi and his son and his spokesman that they're fighting al-Qaeda and that al-Qaeda has drugged Libyan teenagers with hallucinogenic pills. Again, what you just said shows that to be completely false.
I saw absolutely no evidence of any Al-Qaeda either influence or input or anything to do with terrorism at all. The only terrorism appeared to be coming from outside and focusing in on this town. Everyone I spoke to, and there were hundreds of people, thousands who I was mixing with and mingling with in the hospital, in the mosque, in the town, in the square, amongst some of the defectors. They are primarily people who live in that town. They're very determined to try and impress that there is no Al-Qaeda influence. I had a couple of colleagues, journalist colleagues, who were in Tripoli, who, when the mobile phone network was still up, they were texting me and saying, at the moment they're saying the government spokesman here is saying that they've retaken the town. And I said, well, they could hear all the firing in the background of my telephone conversations with them. And it was a complete lie. Later on that day, they said, apparently the forces have moved in and they've regained control, and they say that you're lying. At this point, we were under fire, being shelled on, gunfire all around. I mean, it wasn't even just one side. It was top, bottom, left, right, in front, behind, absolutely under attack. And as soon as the government forces pulled back, the place was filled with Zawiyah civilians and residents again. If they weren't against Colonel Gaddafi before, they absolutely are to a man and woman now. There is no one there who wants him, and the only way that town can be taken control of by the authorities or the Colonel Gaddafi forces is if they actually took up residence in the town and never left.
You also report on something we have heard many reports of but have not directly seen. You actually were in an ambulance that was fired on by Libyan government forces.
Yes, we've got, we ourselves were fired on whilst we were in the ambulance. At the front of the ambulance, there were two doctors clearly identifiable in green medical gowns. But also at the hospital, we've got on film at least two ambulances who came in with bullet holes all the way down one side. The back rear window had been shot out, so the whole of the window was taken out. And whilst I was there, and my crew were there were people being unloaded from the ambulance, and the shelling was landing right next to the hospital. The actual doctors and medical staff who were around this stretcher trying to take in this wounded civilian, there were about 25, 30 of them, all in blue medical gowns, green medical gowns, white medical gowns, thought they were being attacked and scattered.
What is happening in Libya threatens to be hidden, unknown. The regime is doing everything they can to make it hard on reporters there, not only not allowing them to go where they want to. A BBC crew, as we mentioned, was held for 21 hours, beaten, they say, and even subjected to a mock execution. We've talked to Libyans every night on the phone, and they've told us what they've witnessed. But now a reporter from Sky News, Alex Crawford, got into Zawiyah and stayed through several days of fierce fighting. At times, she and her team thought they might die. They saw a lot of civilians die, a lot of wounded too. Her reporting is direct evidence, gathering evidence that Gaddafi is lying about who he is fighting and how he's doing it. More now in my conversation with Sky News' Alex Crawford. One of the things I found so moving, I mean, beyond the injuries and the courage of people who were defending for themselves against this onslaught, was them coming up to you and saying, please, please get these pictures out. Please tell our story, because otherwise their deaths will be in vain, and no one will know really the truth about what is happening there right now and continues to happen there right now at this hour. For you, you use the word massacre. Are you saying what is happening there is a massacre?
Well, the true sense of the word massacre is large-scale deaths, right? There are large-scale deaths going on there, and these are primarily, I mean, seriously, they are 99% of them are civilians. They are women. They are children. They're old people. They're not fighters. They're not soldiers. They're just people who are criticising or who want a change of government. No, I don't, if that's what a massacre, I don't know what is. They actually can't do much to defend themselves. They are powerless to even leave. They can't even get out of the way of the firing. And they're continuing to be pounded now. And that's why, at the end, there was almost constant firing, but one particular brave individual managed to get us out under fire. And it was so important for them to know that we were going to be able to broadcast the pictures to the world. Because as far as the Gaddafi authorities are concerned, that didn't happen. The march didn't happen. There aren't tens of thousands of people in Zawiyah who are critical of Colonel Gaddafi, and they aren't being shelled and they aren't being killed. And if we hadn't actually had the help and support of these incredibly courageous people, they would still be saying that. But now that the pictures, I would suggest, put paid to those lies. I mean, you know, how can we make up those pictures? We saw people dying with the most horrible injuries, and they are civilians. They are boys that are as old as my son, who's 15. They are young men. I saw one young man who looked as though he was, you know, he might be a university student if he was living in Britain or America. You know, he had glasses on, he was wearing a T-shirt and jeans, he didn't look you know, at all like a soldier. He was being shown at the last minute, as these tanks were rolling into the square, how to use a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. And someone was saying, put it on your shoulder, look, just try and kneel a bit and just fire. And he says, Allah Akbar, and goes off to fight, and probably is not alive now. I mean, these are civilians, so I don't know what, if that isn't a massacre, I really don't know what is.
Well, Alex, I've been just so struck by your reporting over these last several days, and thank you for talking with us, and I'm so glad you're safe, and I'm so glad you've been able to tell the world what is really happening, the truth about what is happening in Zawiyah. Thank you.
Thanks for asking me on.
Alex Crawford, who's now in Dubai.